Uh-oh.
No, just a little bit. No, I know. It was
Beth, it's not what you put in, right? The kettle chips didn't defile you.
okay, so. But
They
I
might have
know
led you more to the kingdom of heaven. We don't know.
they might get me there quicker, but.
All right. Well, what word
They weren't salted.
is better? That's better. What word or phrase or sentence stood out to you? What did you notice?
I think verse 26 doesn't make sense.
Is that where I stopped? Because it didn't flow easily, did
No.
it?
The verse, he answered, "It is not fair to take the
Yeah.
children's food and throw
I'm
it to the
not
dogs."
understanding his parable.
You're not alone.
I was gonna say, am I the only one?
Nope, you're not
Now,
alone.
that's where I thought I had skipped a line, because it just didn't.
It just like went into it.
You know,
I always thought he was saying even the weakest and the poorest and the worst, person in the whole world deserves to be taken care of.
Eventually, but I don't think that's what he's starting to
You
say.
don't think that's what it means here?
Eventually, yes.
Oh.
But I don't think in
I
26.
I meant 26.
Yeah,
No, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, that's what I was.
what
talking
he's
about.
saying, what I think he is saying, and we'll get into the Greek and some of the world behind the text. But this is Jesus talking to a woman that was not a Jew, not a Hebrew, a Canaanite, and as we know, even to this day, that's the source of so much of the issues in the Middle East. Still is, right? It's ongoing.
Where did she
What?
all of a sudden come from? Because the Canaanites, it was a long time ago that they come to that area. Is this kind of a leftover?
Oh yeah, I mean, that was what they would have called one another different names. So Mark uses Greek and Syrophoenician, but Matthew takes it a little bit further to say, like, look, this culture that it's kind of pushing in on us, and especially because remember Matthew's community is right, mainly Jewish, and trying to figure out what are they doing, where are they going, are they still Jewish, are they this new sect of Judaism that's following the way of Christ, has the Messiah truly come? But then there were also these, Cana is sometimes connected with Palestine, like Palestinians, like people that would have been darker skinned, would have been from the rural area that was pushing in from the east. And so this was a cultural divide. There was a cultural divide then, and just like there is now. And so these people would have been at odds with one another. So when Jesus is crossing over into a different district, into an area that would have been less familiar, he's encountering somebody that was not of his culture. And his response when she asked for help is not, yeah, let's do it. It's calling her a dog, because the children in this case are the children of Israel. That's what he's saying.
So he's actually calling her a dog.
Yeah. So we'll dig into it, and that's one interpretation.
He's just saying, he says, I don't have time for you, outsider. You don't deserve
Well, that's
me.
different than calling her, yeah.
Right.
But he's using a metaphor.
Yeah,
And I can't tell if it's
Like,
more or
you're
less
not
offensive.
Jewish, I'm not going to help you.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not Jewish.
Yes.
I heard that on TV yesterday.
yeah, it doesn't sound like Jesus, but.
Oh no, it doesn't sound like Jesus. So
the disciples were leading him. They were trying to get him to not be distracted by this.
well, and she is shouting. So that's hard.
That could be annoying.
That could
He
be.
did not answer her at all.
Right.
He didn't answer.
I know. Well, and it also, it connects. It makes me think of the feeding of the 5,000, which we recently heard, and the disciples saying, "Lord, we don't even have. This is what we've got." And he's like, "Okay, well, give people something to eat." And instead, here he's like, "No, you're right. Let's get this person out of here." So it feels. Everybody. Look, we're all walking contradictions, right? Like every single one of us. And so Jesus would have been a human, and there would have been times when it's like, well, you said this to this person, and you said that to that person. And that happens a lot when he's talking to Pharisees. He's saying different things to Pharisees than he is to the prostitutes and the tax collectors and the sinners. And so I think we always have to be mindful of Jesus having a contextual ministry. While we take the universal, you know, work of salvation that happens in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and the ministry that still is ongoing in the church, like this is a very in time, tangible, incarnate reality that he's entering. Right? There's different cultural norms. He's also interacting in all these different cultures coming together in a place that was and still is kind of this holy land, right? Like it's not just Jews' holy land. It's not just Muslims' holy, it's Christian holy. It's a lot of people's holy land, and even was kind of there, this cross section, this, you know, of trade getting from the west to the east. It was Greek culture, Roman culture meeting, you know, even African culture, right? I mean, we know about Egypt. So like I think we have to think of this as like, it's much more complicated than just like Jesus is being a jerk, which he kind of seems like he is. But we also need to understand that this was a very pluralistic society, not unlike the United States of America, or at least how I hope we are, a pluralistic society. So, any other words or that was just like one word or phrase. So, any other words or phrases that have stood out to y'all?
She kind of wins the wordplay argument.
Oh, she does. Yeah. She's
It's a little bit Shakespearean.
yes.
He throws one out, and then she comes back and gets the better of it.
Yeah.
Like his was supposed to be a mic drop.
Right. All right. I'm also drawn to "Woman, great is your faith."
Yeah.
That's a powerful phrase, and we can contrast it. But yeah, the turn of phrase there is probably the one that gets me and catches me up short kind of every time. That she is so bold and so faithful.
We don't know her source of information about him.
Right.
And,
But she's desperate enough as a woman that has a sick child to go across all of these divides and to even strike out, you know? I know like when I was in seminary, one of the soft skills that they taught us was we had to do the like phonathon and call people, alumni and supporters, and ask them for money and tell them about the seminary. No big deal. I was usually the top seller, but no big deal. I was the one that would come in with the biggest sales or the biggest money collected or pledged for the evening. But it was one of these interesting things that was a time when I really learned that the worst thing that somebody can tell you is no. And so you just ask, and you know, it's okay if somebody says no. That's their right. But she's so audacious as to go out on a limb and say that, you know, not just I'm gonna ask him this, but I'm gonna respond to what he says with, you know, a sense of I have my own personhood. I'm not a dog, and it's a powerful witness.
She was a mother trying
Yeah.
to take care of her child.
Exactly.
And, you know, any of us parents would
That's right.
keep going and keep going and keep going to
Yeah.
take care of her child.
Yes.
She gets him to snap out of it.
Yeah, that's
she
right.
does.
Which is, you know, I really relate to Jesus in this moment, because there's times when I'm just like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, and then it's like 2 minutes before the service, and somebody says something to me, and I'm like, oh, okay, I gotta stop, you know, and can't always respond in that moment, but usually it can shift when we're so caught up in getting what we think we need to get done. So, right, let's hear it again, this time from the Message. Listen for, what is God calling us into? How does this lesson comfort, challenge, or confuse us? And along with that, if you have any questions, as you're listening through this time, after just a moment of pause, when we finish it, I'd love to hear y'all's questions so we can hopefully get to those as we dig into the worlds of the text. So here's the Message's translation of Matthew 15:21 through 28. From there, Jesus took a trip to Tyre and Sidon. It had hardly arrived when a Canaanite woman came down from the hills and pleaded, "Mercy, Master, Son of David, my daughter is cruelly affected by an evil spirit." Jesus ignored her. The disciples came and complained, "Now she's bothering us. Would you please take care of her? She's driving us crazy." Jesus refused, telling them, "I've got my hands full dealing with the lost sheep of Israel." Then the woman came back to Jesus, dropped to her knees, and begged, "Master, help me." He said, "It's not right to take bread out of children's mouths and throw it to dogs." She was quick. "You're right, Master, but beggar dogs do get scraps from the master's table." Jesus gave in. "Oh, woman, your faith is something else. What you want is what you get." Right then, her daughter became well.
That's an easier
It's more bare buns, which is saying something, because sometimes Peterson is a little bit more difficult to understand.
Is Peterson the one that wrote the Message?
Eugene Peterson, yep, that's right.
Like all of these, it's very compressed.
Mm-hmm.
Like a method actor would take a lot of
Sure.
time between even a beggar, even a gets the crumbs, right?
Right.
He would take time
Mm-hmm.
before he just went. So there would be a big moment.
Yes.
In between the lines.
Yeah, it's beautiful to think. I mean, and I'm glad we've got Kenny among us, because you do have that theatrical kind of perspective, which helps us to see this is, where are these people? What's the blocking like, so to speak? How are they moving? Where's the action? Where's the focus of the story? And if you kind of dramatize it, I'm not saying like it's making it something that's over the top necessarily, but if you dramatize it in your mind, you can kind of see maybe some things you wouldn't otherwise see. So,
Well, if it was like The Chosen, the TV show or a
Mhm.
movie, she would say that, then there'd be silence, then there'd be music,
Mhm.
then Jesus would walk around or something and get himself back together.
Yeah.
Then he would say what he had to say.
Yeah.
Right? It's not rote.
Mm-mm.
It's not glib. It feels glib in the writing, but it's not. I don't think it is.
Well, what's God calling us into? Or does this Lumford, wow, that was a fun word. How does this lesson comfort, challenge, or confuse you? And maybe what questions do you have here? What questions don't you have here?
I think that, to me, this woman went to Jesus to ask for his help,
Mm-hmm.
and he refused her. He didn't respond.
Right.
But then when she came back to him,
Yes.
that shows me that she had faith
Yes.
that he could heal her
Yeah.
and heal her family,
Mhm.
whatever. And I think maybe Jesus was kind of testing her faith.
Yeah, or I mean, who knows? I mean, there could be. It's hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. I mean, like if he's tired and he's been traveling, and he's still grieving the death of John the Baptist, and we have to recognize that God and Jesus would have felt the exact same emotions we would, right? And so he's got to be tired. He's got to be worn, and perhaps perhaps he was just kind of pushing her off because he thought like this is what I need to be focused on. But it is a test for her, regardless of if it's intentional for him. And she comes back, and so that does show this sense of faith, which, there's connections here. I don't think I'd make this connection in my notes here, but I think of the persistent widow, right? The one that keeps coming back.
The fact that the disciples came to Jesus
Mhm.
and said, do something about this.
Right. She's a troublemaker. This is a great example of this. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Sometimes we need to make noise to have the problems that people are experiencing become more prevalent. I mean, that's why protesting works, right? Because when people are striking works, like because people see, oh, these people are not getting what they need.
Well, I think we do it right now because when I want something changed and I come to you and say, I don't like that, I want you to change it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And generally you do.
Yeah. I try to be I don't want to be the unjust judge. I want to hear what, y'all are saying.
Anything that you want fixed, it's just.
Come talk to me. I try to. Yeah. Other bits, other questions. I mean, I certainly feel discomfort when Jesus is saying this to this woman. Kind of like embarrassed. I'm like, Jesus, is that you? Is that really you saying that?
This probably qualifies as one of the hard sayings. of
Yeah,
Jesus.
that's right. And also, there's something that I think, we have to recognize. Now, we're not culturally Canaanite, but spiritually, we're not Jewish, right? We inherit the tradition. I would say we hold it up and hold it as sacred, but Jesus might have said the same thing to us because his ministry at that moment was towards the people of Israel. We're kind of nearing the end of the middle of the Gospel of Matthew, the Gospel of Jesus Christ according to Matthew, and so we're at this maybe more critical moment. But I don't know, I am noticing more as we go through this liturgical year than I really ever have, that Jesus is transforming throughout Matthew. And his mission is becoming broader and broader. And we know that by Matthew 24, he'll say, in the resurrection, baptize in the name of the Father and the Son. I send you to all nations to take the good news to the kind of four corners of the earth.
There's a big problem with this, though.
What's that?
What you want is what you get. Right then, her daughter became well. That gets abused by all the faith healers.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
100% agreed. Yeah.
So, like, I have a friend in the hospital right now. She's not going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Her faith is strong.
Right.
So that's a problem I have with this.
Yeah. Well, and your faith is great. Let it be done for you as you wish. Yeah. I mean, both of these are kind of imply that if you have faith strong enough, but it's not about. I mean, this is where we get in trouble.
He's not teaching the disciples like he often does.
Right.
Like, you guys missed it, but he missed it too.
Yes, and faith here is not intellectual assent. We have to remember that. It's not like she's saying, yes, you're the guy. I mean, but she believes that. That's what she believes. And so also faith, elsewhere he'll say faith, your faith has made you well, which I prefer that phrase because that doesn't imply just like you're going to live forever. Like even Lazarus died, friends. Like he wasn't resurrected and he's still kicking around somewhere. That would be scary. But like, all of us will go down to the grave. And yet like the faith, I think, and ultimate healing is not necessarily getting well and staying well in this life, although, I know we all want to live long and full and quality lives. But at some point we have to recognize that the ultimate healing is not of this earth. Right? We've started eternal life, but this is not the end of it. Thanks be to God. Right? I mean, I hear that this is a troubling text, a problematic text.
It's just one of those that gets misused.
Yeah. In both ways. I mean, I think, we can say even Jesus was
A lot of
racist or by a
the negative aspect of this, you don't know where he is, because he was supposed to be in the Sea of Galilee.
Mm-hmm.
He's traveling to Tyre.
Yeah.
That's across the mountains.
Right.
And, according to the maps that we have, it's maybe between 50 and 80 miles. But if
Mhm.
you go up and down the mountains, maybe even a little bit further.
Yeah.
And, it really bothers me, Jesus left that place. Now, what is that place? And this free translation that is on the bottom, from there, Jesus went somewhere else. Where is he? How come he is facing this?
Yeah.
This Canaanite woman is hiding out in the mountains? Is she right on the coast? It kind of leaves you hanging, at least me. But then again, it's me.
Yeah, so I can help us kind of with some of those questions.
I come to the same conclusion that Jenny just said, that all of a sudden there's a sentence thrown in, about throwing food to the dogs.
Mm-hmm.
There's no introduction to this.
Mm.
We just, poof, there it is.
Well, she says she recognizes him as the Messiah.
The son of
Son
David.
of David is the Messiah. So she's recognizing him, seeing the truth of him, which he doesn't hear that at first.
Right, and where does
But eventually he does
where
from.
does that come from?
The son of David? That term?
No, that this Canaanite woman recognizes that he's got more power than anybody else he knows.
Yeah. So we see it with the Syrophoenician woman. We see it with the woman at the well. We see this. It's always the women that are getting it right in the gospel accounts. I'll say that again and again because it needs to be said, especially in front of my wife. The women get it right. So there's a lot here, and I've got some notes to help us kind of. Because I didn't want to forget some of the cultural aspects here. So this is loaded language, right? And Mark has a story. I've already told y'all. He calls the woman a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, and Matthew deliberately changes that identification to Canaanite. So it's a very similar story, but that matters because Canaanite was an archaic, biblically charged designation by Matthew's time. Matthew's not supplying her passport information. He's actually going back to ancestral memory. So she's not just a Gentile. She is the ancestral enemy of the Jews. Canaanites are the people Israel encounters in the stories of the conquest. Remember...
Land of Canaan.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember if Goliath is a Canaanite. Am I right in thinking that? Somebody help me here.
I'll look it up.
So they regularly represent religious, ethnic, and cultural otherness in Israel's scriptures. By calling this woman a Canaanite, Matthew accentuates the distance between her and Jesus. So in Matthew's storytelling world, she's almost an ancestral enemy, and scholars therefore commonly understand Matthew's change from Mark Syrophoenician to Canaanite as deliberate rhetoric that makes the boundary being crossed sharper and more uncomfortable. So Matthew may have been tinkering with the language to try to speak directly to his audience, right?
Goliath was a Philistine.
Philistine, that's right. Those godless Philistines. So what changes if we hear Canaanite less like a nationality, more like Matthew saying, here comes someone from the people our ancestors were taught to distrust. Like that, we're in the South. We don't have to go too far to see, problematic things our ancestors did and ways in which we've inherited those things, right? From racism to sexism to homophobia, all the isms that we hold up. So yeah, I think it's not hard for us to say, hey, that person coming in our doors doesn't. I don't know about them. They don't look like us. So we figured out we can actually we do pretty well actually with Baptists and Catholics, but some other of the denominations, I don't know. That's
They
not
say
really true. We'll take anybody.
The dog whistle word today is cultural.
Yeah.
They're not of our culture.
Right.
That's what the congresswoman I heard yesterday say.
Yeah.
They should go back to their culture.
So this story obviously is not just something that is dead, right? It's a living and breathing word that speaks to us now. So let's keep going and talk about Tyre and Sidon, because you were asking those questions. Where is he coming from? What's going on? So Jesus has primarily been in Galilee. That's where it's kind of thinking of he's if Jerusalem is New York City, he's maybe in South Carolina or something when he's in Galilee, or maybe Alabama. I don't know. Maybe he's in Alabama. Not the cultural center of the Jewish world, and really it's the backwater area. And so he's been disputing immediately before this with the Pharisees. I told you all about it's not what goes in, it's what proceeds or comes out that is what defiles us. So Jesus, maybe he was sick of dealing with all these people, goes to Tyre and Sidon, and those were Phoenician coastal cities northwest of Galilee, outside the heartland of Jewish territory. Matthew says Jesus went into their region. The text does not necessarily mean that Jesus walked through downtown Tyre or Sidon. Sidon itself was roughly 25 miles farther north than Tyre, so he's probably not going all the way up there. And that is strange enough to notice because earlier Jesus explicitly instructed the 12. What did he say? Go nowhere among the Gentiles, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And now Jesus is doing the exact opposite. I mean, I'm wondering if he's trying to test his disciples in this moment a little bit too. It's strange. I mean, it's certainly enough to notice. And so now Jesus moves actually toward Gentile territory. And there, almost immediately, the theological question from back in Matthew 10 about going nowhere among the Gentiles becomes embodied in an actual person. So what happens when the lost sheep of Israel run into someone outside Israel who desperately needs mercy?
Outside their jurisdiction.
Yeah, right. So the geography, I'll get there sometime, therefore functions as more than travel information. This is really talking more about boundary crossing and a confrontation at the actual boundary between these two cultures. So the website, again, I highly recommend, called Working Preacher, if you're ever wanting to dig further into text. It's a Lutheran run website, but
What'd you call it?
The Working Preacher. It's from Luther Seminary up in Minnesota. Maybe that's where Bronson is. Maybe he's consulting with them. So that might be where he is. He's up in Minnesota.
It's outside his jurisdiction.
It might be, yeah. So Jesus is, the geography functions more than travel information. Working Preacher aptly notes the irony. Jesus has entered her world, yet she becomes the one treated initially as the outsider. What does that speak to? I mean, that speaks to me as a white man, because often it doesn't matter what neighborhood I walk into. I've been given the privilege of being a white man. And I have to kind of understand what that power and privilege does for me.
Well, when I lived in New York City, two friends and I we were going to the opera, and we were way uptown, 215th Street, right? But the subway died, and they made us get off in Harlem, right? About 150th Street, or
Okay.
We didn't have any privilege there.
No. Well,
Right? That was in the 80s.
right. So but look, you're going back to the 80s. I'll go back to the time when I felt really othered. I went to Haiti in 2004, and I'm riding in the back of a pickup truck, and all these people are looking at me and going, blanc, 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 like
Yeah.
white person, white person, white person, because a lot of them have never seen a white person. And I'm feeling like othered. They wanted to come up and like touch us, which was strange. It still felt very privileged, though. But yeah, I think sometimes we can walk into a neighborhood and go, I don't have power in this neighborhood, do I?
I spent 3 summers working for the recreation department in Jacksonville, Florida.
Yeah.
And I was the only white person there.
Yeah.
And they didn't care, and I didn't care.
Right?
It
Yes.
didn't matter to me.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I'm one of the few, apparently,
Mhm.
because
That's right.
as we go to the VA, every day practically.
Yeah.
There are more black people than there
Mhm.
are white.
Yeah.
But they are all polite, they all speak,
Yes.
they enunciate.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I've taught lessons and you have to teach them language, and
Yeah.
They're willing to make changes.
Well, I think we have to
So, yeah.
we have to confound our understanding. We have to challenge our understanding, and the only way to do that is actually by crossing those boundaries, like what you're talking about.
I was
So-
talking to one woman, we were sitting there waiting for our turn one day, and we got to talking about Jesus, and their way of worship is different from ours.
Sure.
But when we're talking about things, and she was talking about Jesus, and I can't remember what brought it up, and she was talking about him way back then, and I said, well, yeah, he was black. And she said, yeah, we all think he's white, and he's not.
Right.
We never bring that up.
He's
Yeah.
also Jewish.
Jewish, Palestinian looking. I mean, like he would have been from what Galilee is really a Palestinian place in this time. So he would have been dark skinned, dark haired, and there's evidence in both in the Old Testament and then in I can't remember if it's Luke or Matthew, but like he was hard to look upon. I think was the words, because it was almost this. He would have been very attractive, but also someone that present would have been. It would like when you're in the presence of somebody that is so present, sometimes that throws us off. I don't know
Like
if y'all
they're staring at you.
like they can see into you, they can see into your soul, and I believe that's who Jesus was. And so yeah, I think we as much as it is helpful sometimes for us to envision Jesus in our own kind of way because we can connect with him, but it's even more important for us to know who the historical Jesus was, and to know that he wasn't Nordic Jesus that had, not that I'm against, I'm part Nordic, so would have been fine with Nordic Jesus, but he didn't have blonde hair, he didn't have blue eyes, he didn't, have pale skin.
I have this great picture at my house that my grandmother hung in her house. It's a big picture of Jesus with blonde hair and, looked just like us.
Yeah.
It's the very famous
Yeah,
one.
very Scandinavian.
I was going to say all the Renaissance paintings.
Oh, yeah.
And all that stuff. The one that was in all the Baptist churches.
Yes.
In Sunday
Yeah.
school rooms.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep going. What happens next? Kind of this tension between. Well, we're still in the world behind the text. Jews and people of Tyre, Sidon, not simply personal prejudice. It's not. We should avoid imagining two neatly segregated populations who never encountered one another. This is a territory that we're economically connected, and people would move across these regions. Biblical tradition supplied plenty of symbolic hostility. Tyre and Sidon would have perhaps to Matthew's community represented Gentile power, idolatry, foreign influence, sometimes economic exploitation. Because, like the Jewish people were very focused on, I think, treating their commandments were to treat the foreigner with hospitality, at least historically. Now, sometimes when we see a culture having to say that over to themselves again and again, maybe that was an aspirational value and not a lived value.
Can you say that one more time?
So the Jews, we see throughout the Old Testament these examples of keeping 10% of your farm from being mown so that the foreigner can come and collect the grain so that they'll have something. There's so many examples, and then Jesus kind of brings it forward. But here's an interesting kind of moment where that tension is existing. But Jews would not have, I think, in this moment, been seen as ones that exploit the foreigner. But they were perhaps being exploited. And so that might be some of their tension. But of course, the Jews were probably not perfect. And so there was probably exploitation on both sides. I mean, that's what I mean by aspirational value. I think, it's like every Episcopal church's website says we are a hospitable community. And we really are. But I mean, a lot of communities y'all may have walked into, hospitable. Like, if you look like us, if you dress like us, if you believe like us, that's the hospitality. We'll be hospitable.
Where
to
are the
you.
Romans in all of this?
They would have been kind of policing it all and taking their cut, and everybody would have hated them. It would have been the people that were the oppressors of all.
So they're moving in subcultures.
Yeah, that's right. And just like in other times, when you get farther away from the big cities, sometimes the resources aren't there for the oppressive power to hold sway. So
Right.
Jesus' ministry in Galilee gets a lot of movement and traction in part because there's no thumb pushing down on them from Rome. But when you go into Jerusalem, we start to hear in all of the gospel accounts, okay, the Romans were preparing because this was a big Jewish festival, the feast of the Passover, and so this is a different time and place than Galilee. So Holy Week in Jerusalem is very different culturally than where we are now, outside the kind of regular places where Rome would have had big authority and a huge hand on things.
Can I offer something that when I was at Southside, I attended Friday night services at Temple Emmanuel.
Mm-hmm.
Really enjoyed it. Started going after October 7th, and I really enjoyed it. But they put Moses way above Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah.
They talk about Moses in the same way that we talk about Jesus.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm saying there are big differences still,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yes.
That I, as a Christian, say, oh, well, us and the Jews have everything in common, but we don't. Right?
Yeah, right.
In 1963, the principal of Shades Valley High School called the valedictorian into his office and said, we have tried and tried and tried, we've dug up papers, we've done all this stuff, but there is nobody else that comes close to qualifying to get this honor. If you Jews are just all just alike. I can't believe we have to call a Jew our valedictorian.
Oh, my.
Lord.
How did that come to be known?
It came to be known about 25 years ago at one of our reunions.
Wow.
19.
And she was also not allowed to go to wedding receptions at Birmingham Country Club, even if she was in the wedding.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We also weren't allowed to join the Birmingham Country Club if you were a single female.
Yeah.
Wow, wow.
Well,
That
they
happened
were
because
very
all of our lawyers were in the Birmingham Country Club except me, because I was the only female and I couldn't join.
Well, Ben Ash was never allowed to join, they stayed there either.
Well, I guess the reason I'm saying it is there's the hegemony or the group that's in power dictates, but there doesn't seem to be that here. That's why I asked about Rome. There doesn't seem to be a power. They're in a no person's land.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and also, if you've ever had encounters in borderlands, whether we're talking
Borderlands, yeah.
in Europe or, I mean, if you've been to, I've spent time in South Texas in the borderland between Mexico and the United States, and it's not the United States and it's not Mexico. It's a third world. I mean, it's not a third world. Like, I mean, there are some impoverished people there, but it's more a like third culture. It's not, Spanglish is a lot of what is spoken, and the culture is very Mexican, but the resources are very American. So it's a very interesting culture to be in. And unfortunately, when I was in seminary, we did something called encuentro, like encounter. And unfortunately, this was the class before us got to go to Mexico, but our seminary's insurance did not want to insure our safety, because this was when cartels were kind of the first big wave of kind of cartels in the
What year was that?
That was 2010, 2011. So,
But that's where they are.
right, the borderlands.
They're in the borderlands,
Mhm.
which I would have never gotten that. Like
Yeah.
you said earlier about leaving that place to go there.
Yeah.
That makes it more clear for me.
So one thing to take from this, this is all kind of what we're swimming in, but one insight is sometimes the outsider sees what the insider cannot. So sometimes other cultures can speak something to us that we can't see about ourselves. I love what Gandhi said about Christians, where he's like, I love your Christ, but I'm not so sure about you Christians. Like, because it's like, maybe we're not living into the person the example that was left by the person we're following. So, all right. Always good to ask, and I've enjoyed kind of thinking as we go through the world behind the text, did this really happen? So there's at least 3 levels worth distinguishing. Historical Jesus. Jesus' seminar did not consider this particular healing story historically secure. Its broader work did judge Jesus to have functioned as healer, even exorcist, but it was considerably more skeptical about whether individual miracle narratives preserve in some like perfect historical episodes, like ones that actually happened. And so early Christian tradition, this is the second way, Matthew would have interpreted, Matthew did not invent the story from nothing. Mark 7:24 through 30 contains the earlier version of essentially the same encounter. So Matthew's theological shapings is another way for us to look at this. Matthew significantly intensifies the conflict. And that would have made sense, because Mark's world it wasn't like Mark was just, everything was hunky-dory, but it was closer to the light of the resurrection, right? It was earlier. And so there would have been these tensions that existed, but it would have been heightened after the fall of the temple. And when, this community that has a lot of Jewish influence, that is Matthew's community, would have seen the pillar of their community fall, there would have been more distinction. Like in times of war, like the boundaries get drawn a little bit more distinctly. Sometimes we have to ration gas, or we have to ration supplies, or you can't. The United States, we've been living in such excess that usually does not happen to us, but I know around the world that's happening every day to people. So for Matthew here, he's making that distinction more clear. But a Canaanite woman says, "Son of David." That would probably be an added detail. That she probably wouldn't have said that. adds Jesus' silence, which is what you picked up on, him kind of maybe walking around, adds the disciples wanting her to be sent away, and adds, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Matthew has therefore turned an already difficult story into an explicit debate about the boundaries of Jesus' mission. That may tell us something about Matthew's community. Matthew is profoundly Jewish and simultaneously, remember, ends with go therefore and make disciples of all nations. So I think there's this tension being lived out. I don't think it was maybe as authentic to Jesus' own ministry as what the trajectory of Matthew's Jesus community's trajectory was. Does that make sense? Like they're struggling with this and they're trying to figure out what are we supposed to do? And this is a story that helps move them into go make disciples, therefore, of all nations. Because it starts to complicate, even Jesus maybe wouldn't have held this line like we're holding this line.
And the really strict literal reading of it is where you get the faith healers.
Yeah, right.
Come again?
The faith healers, like if you read this as,
Just the literal words,
you,
right?
what you want is what you get. Like if you pray hard enough, if you have enough,
Prosperity doctrine.
Yeah.
Magic.
right. Give me money enough to have an airplane, guys, and your life will be so blessed. I promise. But I need to be able to fly. I don't know why. I don't know why a pastor would need an airplane. By the way, I just don't get it.
Spread the blessings.
Yes. All right, let's go into the world of the text. We're not even into the world in front of the text, and we're already saucy, or spicy, which is good. So I think it's kind of helpful to look at these different terms. But if we look at the shape, before we get to Lord, Son of David, if we look at the whole shape of this, it's like escalating obstacles. The woman asks for mercy. Jesus responds with the silent treatment. Man, when somebody doesn't want to be around when you've got the silent treatment. The disciples respond, get rid of her. Jesus responds, this is my mission, to be with the people of Israel. And for the record, Jesus has this is not the only place where Jesus is very fixated upon sticking to his mission. Early in Mark, he does the same thing when Peter and the disciples want him to continue a feeding, healing ministry, and he's like, no, I got to go to the next town. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. But I think here the mission is maybe drawn too small. It's too insular. It's too focused on what Matthew's community would have been focused on. So he says, my mission is Israel, but then she responds with this very humble gesture. And Jesus responds with this children and dogs. And she still stays. She stays through the insult. And this is a moment of, in the theater world, we would call it improvisation. It's over-acceptance, right? She takes what he says and she over-accepts it and flips it and then gives it back to him. So,
Spirited.
yeah. So, yeah, I am a dog, but even the dogs get the crumbs under the table. So you see how this is like a series of locked doors. And every door she still knocks on. And eventually she gets home. So I think that's a really powerful shape to kind of look at.
Like in the movies when somebody is trying to get in to see the most important person in the movie.
And they have to go these roundabout ways.
Yeah,
And
you can't go in there,
Yeah.
and they barge on in anyway,
Yeah.
and then they go, oh yeah, welcome. You're right. I should have known that was.
yes. Yeah. So, and it helps us to understand, what is the persistence? What kind of persistence does our faith in God require? Because I don't know if it's as much like believe whatever you want and God will grant it, as long as you kind of put the trademark Jesus Christ at the end of it. That's not really how, this works. It's more how can we get so in line with what Jesus' will is? And in this moment, even Jesus seems to lose the Christ thread, or perhaps he's trying to help. The most charitable reading I have for our Lord and Savior, which perhaps is the most ironic thing anybody could ever say, but the most charitable reading is that he was trying to perhaps help his disciples to understand it's wrong for us to draw these lines. It's wrong for us as Jewish people. And you can see that even I changed my mind, which is a way of teaching. I think sometimes we think everything that came out of Jesus' mouth was like fully packaged and ready for us as 21st century wisdom. And it's like, Jesus, he had an incarnate ministry. He's not talking directly to you. He is through the Spirit, but the words on the page were what happened and the response to what happened in this first century movement. And we have to do the work of translating and pulling it to where we are now, and follow whatever breadcrumbs are kind of left by, the historical writers and the people who have been interpreting these texts for thousands of years, like our tradition. All right, so let's move into some of these phrases. Lord, Son of David, astonishing language coming from a Canaanite. Kyrios, is Lord, can range in meaning from a respectful sir to the theological title Lord. Now, Lord, goodness knows, we've kind of layered a lot of meaning on top of that thanks to the medieval ages and our inheritance of kind of British culture as Episcopalians. My lord, my liege. So then, son of David, Huios David, is explicitly Jewish messianic language. So here's some substantial irony. Someone identified as Israel's ancient enemy recognizes Israel's Messiah, their Savior. Just let that sink in. Perhaps it would be like a Christian seeing somebody that was proclaiming to be a Jewish Messiah now and saying, "Oh, this person is the Messiah." I'm not sure, if that's too radical an analogy, but it's really like they're stopping in their tracks. They're not seeing somebody from their own culture and kind of giving them a pat on the back. They're desperately seeking someone, and they believe that even though this person is from a different kind of culture and a historically, foreign or kind of hostile culture, is now like the source of not the resurrection, but the healing that they're looking for. So Matthew repeatedly uses outsiders to expose insiders' inability to see clearly. Here the woman appears to understand something about Jesus that even his disciples continue to struggle to grasp. We'll get to something that's related to that in just a minute. All right. Keep going. Have mercy on me. This is connection to the words that we say often during Advent and Lent. We sometimes say it in the prayers of the people. Lord, have mercy, right? Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. The Kyrie eleison. That's directly connected to this. Have mercy on me. And her daughter is suffering, but the woman says, have mercy on me. So what is that? I mean, there could be a deeper symbolic thing here that has to do with what in the culture is being passed down that is killing the next generation or that is hurting the next generation. There could be a symbolic layer here.
Parent is to blame.
Maybe. Well, I mean, familial healing in the gospel accounts is so crazy to me. There's never a time, at least to my knowledge, where a husband goes to Jesus and says, heal my wife, or a wife goes to Jesus and says, heal my husband. There's not countless, but there's several times where a mother asks for the healing of a child and a father asks for the healing of a child. So it's interesting. I mean, when people want to say biblical models of marriage, which one? because like here, Jesus isn't lifting that up as something. And then of course in the Old Testament, we have everything from a couple wives, maybe one wife, but a couple wives to thousands of wives and concubines, right?
And why isn't the father there with her?
Right.
If you want to ask the.
Yeah, exactly. What's he
Where's
he
he
doing?
doing?
I mean, he might be a tradesperson. He might be out on the sea. He might have lost his life. He might, there's all sorts of things. He might have been with a concubine. He might have left. Yeah. So we should kind of still hear that Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy language here. She says my daughter is sick, but really it's more demonized. My child is badly demonized. This represents destructive powers from which Jesus liberates people. We sometimes make it too much about the guys with the horns, but it's really about the powers of this world and otherwise that are standing opposed to the kingdom and the reign of God. So, yeah. Y'all have had enough, I know.
Forgot what the password is, but anyway.
We've had entirely too much of this. We're leaving. Yeah.
We missed the rest of it, but yeah.
Well, I'm still recording, so you can check out the last bit.
There's lunch.
That is correct. We will share in lunch together.
You have your cane back there.
All right, let's keep going. Disciples try to send her away because their main concern is that she's bothering them. It feels a little bit like the feeding of the masses. That, oh my gosh, it's so inconvenient that we're having to kind of take care, like you're taking care of these people. But there is the reality of sometimes trying to conduct a ministry and somebody doing something problematic. I've only had it maybe once in my life where once as a priest. I'm sure it happened a few times when I was a child at St. Andrew's, but people coming in and disrupting worship.
For what purpose?
Well, sometimes it's a homeless person that is just kind of they may not even realize where they are because often they're
Southside every
often they're using and so it's a ruckus. There's other disruptions. Like I've certainly celebrated through power outages, which are always fun. But when the disciples feel like this is overwhelming them, they kind of assign her to being a problem, like she's the problem. And that happens still today, right? If somebody were to interrupt our worship, we'd be upset. Why are they making that noise? Of course, I think we're getting better and better. I hope we're getting better and better at understanding that when our children disrupt our worship, that is a joyful noise, not a sad noise, not a annoying noise. But yeah, it can make it troublesome to hear. So people in need can become problems. And I think we have to be aware of that and really challenge that assumption in ourselves. Jesus saying that that she is a dog, the Canaria, so where we get canine, diminutive form of a dog that can suggest a smaller household dog. So perhaps it's not the big junkyard dog that he's calling her. But the nuance is worth knowing. But we should be careful. You can't turn it into, Jesus really said, oh, you're a cute little puppy. That's not what Jesus said. Even household dogs in this time and age are not the children. Now, children were not seen as they are now. Even worse than, you should be seen and not heard. It was, you are my property and you shall kind of continue our work as a family. You are a resource to me I am sending you out into the field as soon as I possibly can. Now there would have been love. I'm not saying there's not, there would have always had to be that familial love. I'm forgetting the Greek term, not storgy. No, it is storgy. Storgy, that familial love. Yeah, so children get the food, not the dogs. And I know this is from the world in front of the text, but I also recognize we're running out of time, so we may just have to look at the big questions from the world in front of the text. But is anybody accustomed to the Rite One service that is in the Episcopal Book of Common Prayer? I love that y'all are not accustomed to it because it's hard. It reads like a legal document from the 1800s. But one of the most profound prayers, and I find myself praying this prayer almost daily. And I'm going to pull it up so I don't misread it or misremember it. But it's a prayer called the Prayer of Humble Access. And it doesn't sound particularly good. I mean, it sounds pretty rough. And yet it's one of my favorite prayers, and it kind of connects to this passage. And it comes right after we would say the Alleluia, Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us, therefore let us keep the feast, Alleluia. Then this would be the prayer we would say before the rector or the priest says the gifts of God for the people of God. The people and the priest would say, we do not presume to come to this thy table, O merciful Lord, trusting in our own righteousness, but in thy manifold and great mercies. We are not worthy so much as to gather up the crumbs under thy table, but thou art the same Lord whose property is always to have mercy. Grant us, therefore, gracious Lord, so to eat the flesh of thy dear Son, Jesus Christ, and to drink his blood, that we may evermore dwell in him and he in us. Amen.
We said that every Sunday.
Yeah, that's
Holy Trinity.
yeah. It's
Crumbs.
right. I don't like it for one reason. I love it for my own piety and spirituality. I don't love it because it makes it as though the whole Eucharistic prayer was not in and of itself the thing. That we now have to add on one more prayer to make sure that we're being humble enough here. So I like saying it to myself when I'm getting uppity and like I'm thinking I'm all of that. Somebody said, wow, what a great sermon. I need to kind of say, I do not presume to come to this thy table, O merciful Lord, trusting in my own righteousness. Because it's a ego deflating prayer, which I think is helpful. We've kind of picked up on this already, but great is your faith. Little faith, big faith. What did we hear Jesus say to Peter at the end of last week's gospel account? Do y'all remember? He's slipping into the water. Jesus pulls him out. They get into the boat.
Little faith.
You of little faith. And then right now we get the contrast. Great is your faith. Jesus does that often with people that are the outsiders who come in, get the like necessary information, and they're gone. We don't meet them again. It happens a lot in Mark. It happens a lot with women coming into the text. Then they disappear. One of the greatest examples in Mark is Mary Magdalene washing Jesus's feet with her hair. Is that Matthew, or is that Mark, or is that John? Might be John. But she predates like his foot washing with washing his feet. So, and then she's gone. Like we don't see her again until the crucifixion. But often it's the women that get it, and then they're gone. So they've had the instruction that they needed, and now they are ministers for Christ out into the world. So just more evidence that women should be leaders in the church and should have always been leaders in the church.
Yes.
Yes.
Unless it's a Baptist church.
Well, can't be. Can't be now. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they can't, right.
In Southern Baptist Convention, yes. So,
And the Catholic Church.
and the Catholic Church, that's true. Some other denominations as well.
I thought of the phrase, nevertheless, she persisted, when Mitch McConnell
yeah,
said
yeah,
that
yeah.
about the,
Yeah, that's right.
her faith is a persistence.
Yes. That's right. So did Jesus change his mind? There's several kind of responsible readings of the text. Jesus is testing her. A traditional reading argues Jesus knows all along what he will do and allows the conversation to reveal the woman's faith, strength that preserves divine foreknowledge and fits some theological understanding of Jesus. Problem, nothing in Matthew explicitly tells us Jesus is testing her. It can also make her suffering into an object lesson, right? That makes all of our suffering into, oh, is this just a test? No, I think we just live in a world where death is a thing and where brokenness is a thing and where, we have free will, which is a gift, but it can also be a way that we hurt one another.
Weren't all sicknesses pretty much
Associated, yeah.
Yeah.
When it still is in some
It-
Christian circles, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So what did you ask, weren't all diseases what?
like spiritually based.
Yeah.
Like you have to have greater faith, or you have to.
If
You
you
did.
didn't, if you didn't believe in God, or if you didn't believe this, that you could be healed, then you won't be healed.
I've had conversations with parishioners at our parish. Maybe someone in this room, I can't remember, but people that were a part of a church where, when something happened in their life, like maybe they got a divorce. No, it was something. No, it was worse. It was worse than that. A child died. Like not in childbirth, but died, prenatally and before term. And the elders of the church brought this woman in and said, "What have you done that caused
Oh,
this?"
good Lord.
Oh
You
my
sin.
goodness.
So.
That's real?
That is a real thing that happens.
Every day.
I'm not sure how far away from here, but it's not far.
Sand
Um,
Mountain?
Sand Mountain definitely, but I think even closer to home than
Oh,
that.
yeah, it's closer
Um,
to here. but-
So yeah, it's still it's still a thing that makes me really just want to cry and hug whoever that mama was.
Jim's
So
father died when he was 9, and the priest told his mother that the reason he died was because he never went to church.
oh my
And so that is part of Jim's
Yeah.
reticence.
goodness, yeah.
That
I know
That
plenty.
comes from surface readings
Yeah.
of this. as
And not
opposed to
understanding the-
going into all
Right.
of this.
Also, it's flattening our faith so much that it makes God pretty small. A lot of the folks that believe these sorts of things that make us kind of gasp are trying to make God as small enough as to fit in their pockets and to be able to wield that form of God in their own their own pursuits. Sometimes the pursuits are good. Maybe they're feeding ministries, but a lot of times they're shame-based. They're destructive. They're egotistical too. So it's really, it just breaks my heart that this is what Jesus, the lover of our souls, his ministry has birthed when it's been combined with kind of our capitalistic society, our consumeristic society, where we think everything is transactional. Jesus is not transactional, though. So
Isn't it true? I think C.S. Lewis said this based on somebody else. That anything can become a demon.
yeah,
Your belief, your worship of the Bible,
right.
love, money, anything can become out of its place.
Yeah.
In perspective to a very unhealthy place.
Yeah. Well, he uses some really two good analogies for this. One is, and I've said this before, it's the World War I analogy. A grenade gets thrown in a bunker, and a soldier dives on it, puts his helmet on the grenade, and tries to take the blast, saving his fellow soldiers in the trench. And he does, and he lays down his life for his fellow soldiers. Same action, but no soldiers around. He's committing suicide, right? He's done with the war. He does not want any more. So that's one end where it's like the context of what you're doing matters as much as what you're doing. And the other side of that coin that I love C.S. Lewis, using for us Episcopalians, even though some of us in this room have are in recovery and are trying to kind of stay away from this. But for C.S. Lewis to have in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader in the Chronicles of Narnia, he has Aslan on this ship, the Dawn Treader, and Bacchus comes along on the ship and is allowed to be on the ship at the same time as Aslan. Bacchus, the god of revelry. So, what he's trying to say is you don't have to give away the things that make your life joyful. I don't think God is really asking us to live this dirge of a life. But at the same time, we have to know sometimes drinking a ton of wine is not good for somebody, right? The god of the wine, Bacchus. So you kind of have both sides of that. And I think it can be helpful for us to realize, we've got to be careful about the context in which we're speaking some sort of truth. That is, sometimes truth is not for everybody else. It might be our truth. Even though I hate that word, or I hate that phrase. No, I love the word truth. I don't like my truth.
My truth.
Like I own it. But what is true for me? Like what is healthy for me is not what is healthy for you, right? What is sin for me may not be what is sin for you. So, all right. I told y'all Jesus maybe is teaching the disciples. That may be a second reading. Perhaps Jesus voices conventional boundaries aloud, so the woman's response exposes their inadequacy. That's what I was kind of saying earlier.
Well, if that's true, they never get the message.
Well, yeah, they do in the at the end they do. Well, they definitely do because we're here. So somebody eventually got the message. The strength, the disciples are clearly part of the scene. The problem, again, Matthew never says this, is stage pedagogy. Reading 3, Jesus' mission unfolds through the encounter. Jesus begins with a genuine understanding of his vocation, Israel first. The woman confronts him with the consequences of that boundary. Her faith reveals that the mercy of God cannot finally be contained there. Jesus responds, something has changed. This reading does not necessarily require saying Jesus made a sinful mistake. Luke tells us Jesus grew in wisdom. And the Chalcedonian Christian confession insists Jesus is fully human, not merely God wearing a human costume, what we've been saying, fully divine and fully human. So could genuine humanity include learning through encounter? Of course it could. Could someone outside Jesus' social and religious worlds help reveal the widening implication of vocation? Yes. So the text does not settle the question for us. Perhaps we should resist settling this too quickly. What if the scandal of the story is not that Jesus could learn something, but that Christians sometimes imagine learning from another person? But that Christians sometimes imagine learning from another person and their weakness. I think I miswrote that question.
So this hymn right here we sing all the time?
Which one? Great is thy faithfulness?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not.
Which one?
Great is thy faithfulness.
It's talking about God's faithfulness, which is a different thing. But apparently Jesus doesn't have it at this moment, right?
Oh, I get this question, how I was writing that question out. The scandal here is not that, Jesus could learn something. It's that the scandal is, we as Christians could learn something from another person outside our culture, outside of Christianity. Oh my gosh, that doesn't seem possible. And yet Jesus models that for us right here and elsewhere. I have sheep of another fold. There's some people, that kind of zany, out there theologians, sometimes myself included, who think, what happened between 12 and 33 years old? What happened when Jesus either stayed in the temple, as some people believe, it wasn't that Mary and Joseph found him and brought him back home, it's that he stayed there. Like he was being given to the temple at that time to begin learning, because that would have been an age when you begin learning. Or perhaps he goes somewhere else. I mean, there's people that have theories that he met the Buddha under a tree, or some of these kind of more ridiculous things to think about. But there's so much in other religious traditions that echo, that rhyme with what we believe. So
Well, if you look at Shakespeare, it's the same amount of time he was missing. He kind of shows up
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
London after you know him up to a little bit, and then there's all this. Oh, he went to Greece. Or he didn't write the plays. It's not the same guy.
his wife.
But
his
how
wife
could
did.
you know these missing years? There's no way
Yeah.
to have known them past the point of when a ministry started.
Yeah.
That's the way I'd see it, anyway.
Well, we didn't get to the world in front of the text, but y'all brought a lot of the world in front of the text here. I've given you a bunch of questions to explore. The hardest question, perhaps, is whose voice might God be asking me to hear before I decide whether they belong at the table? Really helpful things. All right, I'm going to share one more thing before we pray, and I'm going to pray that my mom's not watching this because you brought up about Shakespeare. So
Yeah, your mom knows it better than me.
Oh, my mom loves
Yeah,
Shakespeare.
but she knows it better than
And
I do.
she knows it.
I want to make that clear.
She will forget more about
To
Shakespeare
Barbara.
than all of us combined will ever know, I think. She loves Shakespeare. But there's a historical article that recently came out that is pointing more and more towards Shakespeare really not writing what he wrote, that his partner did, and she never got credit for any of it because there are years when they were together and he's so prodigious, and then when she died, no more. So maybe that's grief. Maybe that's grief. Could be a lot of different reasons. The women are right, though. I'm just going to tell you, the women are right. Believe women. All right.
There was a lot of pushback against that, too,
Yeah.
as something that you could even consider.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, there's scholarship, I think, on both sides, and so I like to introduce things that are mysteries for us, because it helps us to understand that you're not going to answer every question, and certainly about God, you're not going to answer every question. All right, we've gone way over. I'm stopping our recording. Thanks for joining us.